Hi there, I'm Linda and this is Huttons Valley Permaculture. As you can see, a lot of my winter garden is now flowering and going to seed, so it's time to start thinking about my summer growing space. I have a tomato bed that's full of weeds, needs a layer of compost, and the trellis is falling over. So today I'm going to get all of that sorted. But first, I thought maybe we could have a look around and see what's happening in the garden. Starting off in my winter garden, I have cleared out a lot of produce and it's fed me well all the winter. But a lot of it is starting to flower. But still, I've got cabbage coming along. I've got cabbages ready to harvest. Lots of leeks in the garden. The celery, which I did fertilise with duck bedding, is going great. And my lettuce, endive, I've got some spinach, all coming along really well. This one here is a perennial spinach, so it'll be good to have that growing well in the garden. My garlic crop's coming along well. They're all starting to really kick into life. Usually I harvest my garlic about November, so I'm looking forward to a really good crop. In a recent video, I planted these parsnips, which are going great, but unfortunately, I think the snails and slugs have found all of my carrots, so I'm going to have to replant those. I've got barely any left hiding under here. Luckily, my original planting of carrots is still going well. In this area here, I've still got some cabbage, some sprouting broccoli that hasn't quite flowered yet, cabbages that are well and truly in need of harvesting. There's some cauliflower. I've got green and a white one. The white one's being a bit nibbled by snails, so I need to get that one in. Down this end of my garlic patch, I have some celery that I've held off harvesting from, so they're actually growing nice and strongly now. So I'll soon be able to pick some of the stalks from these. In this area of my winter garden, I've still got kale growing. This one here is a sorrel which has come back to life, a nice lemony flavoured leaf for salads, but I think I might stop it going to seed this year. I've got sorrel plants coming up everywhere. There's some maturing here, but there's just little seedlings everywhere, so I don't want that to happen, so I'm going to make sure that I get it before the seeds set on that plant. Also in my garden over the back here, I did do a big harvest of beetroot yesterday, but I've got some fairly good beetroot still coming along in this area of the garden. Now in these beds here, I have planted out in this bed peas, just a shelling pea that I like to have in the freezer. And over this side's my experiment with the little trellis and protecting my onion seedlings. So that's working out really well. In the middle, I've got some daikon that's starting to grow well. Over the other side's a bit of turnip, and over here's some red radish, which I didn't have that many come up. I planted them all along, but they haven't seemed to survive very well. On the trellis, I do have some snow peas, which are going to be climbing soon. Down this end of the garden, I've got my broad beans, which are just about to start producing. They don't have any pods on them yet, but they've got these beautiful flowers. And the bees are busy, so we should have some lovely broad beans, in the coming weeks. This bed of onions is finally starting to get going. I've got some good growth happening and the birds have been leaving it alone, so that's exciting. And just behind me here is my fennel patch. I did leave a couple of plants go to seed, and I've been harvesting really decent sized fennel bulbs from this patch here. Also here are celery that is self-seeded, and I've got volunteer plants, and I've also gifted some celery plants from that, so that's really nice to be able to share them around too. In a recent video I showed myself building this garden bed and putting the potatoes in, and I've since gathered some more cardboard and was able to build this second bed, which again I've put potatoes in. It's still maybe 10 days or so from my last frost, and there's no sign of the potatoes as yet, so I think we should make it through that frost risk period and into the growing season. I am trying to get a larger variety of flowering plants in my garden. Nasturtiums seem to take off well, and this calendula plant's looking very happy, but I am adding in quite a few more flowering plants just for the pollinators and for the beauty of it too. Along this lower edge of my garden, I've got my perennial bed. I've got the globe artichokes here, which I've been harvesting from, and also a couple of my asparagus plants are old enough to harvest from, so that's been exciting. Down the end there, I've got my strawberries. They're just starting to flower. This bed here is one of my tomato beds, and I have recently cleared that and got some compost down on it. And I've put in some quick growing crops too. I've got spinach and beetroot and some lettuce. So that's mostly what's happening in the garden. And now that leads us to the tomato bed that I want to renovate. I'm going to harvest some lettuce, get rid of the weeds, get this trellis so it's standing up again, and also clear out this end, which has got some old brassicas in it that the birds have enjoyed, but it's all got to go. First up, I'm going to get these trellises down and out the way. Ooh. Might grab this lettuce before it gets trashed. Saved it from being squashed. We'll just get these right out of the way. Squashed a borage plant, but there's plenty more coming along, so we shouldn't be short of borage. I'm just going to pull these posts right out of the ground because I don't need them in the way, and they're all wobbly, so we'll get those out of the way. Now just to clean out the weeds. Lots of borage seeds in these gardens, so they will return, whether we like it or not. Here you go, lovely. There you go. It's good turning these old plants into eggs. Gives these guys something interesting to do too. With the beds mostly cleared of weeds, I'm just going to rake off the wood chips before adding in my compost layer on top. Helps me identify where I haven't got the weeds out as well. Once again, I'm putting a layer of this mushroom compost on top. Then I do have some of my own compost. It's not really well rotted, so I'm just going to use that for the mulch layer on top of this. I've got a couple of little California poppies here, and I really want to get some variety of flowers in this garden, so I'm going to try and leave those here. There's been plenty of nasturtiums coming up, so I've got to beat them to the space. I mowed grass right next to my pile of compost, which is what you can see in the compost. With that first bit of compost on, I'm going to add in the trellis and see if I can get it a bit straighter than it was before. Yeah, that'll do that. Now this is my oldest compost pile. It's been going for several months, probably 4 months. It got hot, but it didn't sort of retain the heat as long as I really wanted. I think it got a bit wet, so it cooled off, and I don't think it's quite ready, but I think it'll be just fine as a mulch on that garden bed. See, there's a lot of leaf. Probably needed a couple more turns during its life. Even leaving these plastic bags sitting on top is a bad idea. That's rats chewing through it. And you can see there's all bits of plastic on my compost. So I'm going to have to try and get those out. So I won't be putting my chicken bags on top of my compost again. You kind of learn lessons as you go. Yeah. I usually make a few 18-day compost in early autumn, then let them sit for the few months over winter and into spring so that they're ready to add to the garden. This year I did that, but I was a bit slack. This one, it heated up well, but then it got wet and I didn't do anything about it. So it slowed the decomposition and it really needs to go a bit further before it gets onto the garden. My other compost, it dried out. The opposite happened, and I really didn't turn that one enough. I really dropped the ball in terms of compost making this year, but I'll give that a turn and give this one a bit more love. Give it a couple of turns to dry it out a little bit and get it decomposing before I add it to my garden bed. Well, with my compost not quite ready, I won't be adding it to this bed yet. All I'm going to do before I get the tomatoes into the ground in about November is add some bean seeds into this garden bed. I have plenty of those seeds and they're a nitrogen fixer, so that will help get some nitrogen into the ground so that the tomatoes can make a good start. I will be cutting those off before they start to form the beans so that the most nitrogen is available in the soil. Well, I hope you've enjoyed a quick look around the garden today. Thanks so much for watching. Bye for now.